Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic. And let's begin part 5. Naruto and the others were only a few miles from Konoha when they decided to stop for a short break. Naruto himself sat down by a big tree and pulled out a scroll on seals that Jiraiya had given him just before they left Tanzuku town. Zabuza and Haku decided to do a little training and Shizune made herself a cup of tea. As Naruto continued to read the scroll, Kushina watched him from a distance, too nervous to get any closer. Tsunade saw this and walked up to Kushina before she said, "In case you're wondering, he's reading a scroll on Fuinjutsu. I saw Jiraiya give it to him as we left Tanzuku town." Fuinjutsu. Why would he be reading about that? Asked Kushina as she turned toward Tsunade. A few days ago, he learned about the seal Orochimaru placed on Anko-san, and if I know my Naru-chan, he probably wants to find a way to remove it, said Tsunade as a smile formed on her face before she continued. In a way, he's just like his father, always willing to do whatever he can to help the people he cares about. A sad smile appeared on Kushina's face when she heard Tsunade refer to Naruto as hers. With a bit of sadness in her voice she said, "Tsunade-sama. Do you think I'll ever become one of the people Naruto-kun cares about?" I can't really say, because my own feelings on this matter are little mixed, but I can tell you this, you showing up yesterday was probably the worst possible time to do so. I mean, in less than 5 hours he learned that he had a sister, then he's told who his parents were, one of which sealed the Kyuubi into him, and then finding out that one of them was still alive. That's a lot to take in, and in such a short time too, so his reaction wasn't too surprising, said Tsunade as she turned to look at Kushina. Kushina looked at Tsunade with a little confusion before she said, "A little mixed. But Tsunade-sama, I've already told you that I had no idea that they were still alive." Tsunade got a serious look on her face as she said, "I know that, and I have no doubt that there are some people on the council that are capable of destroying whole families, just to accomplish their agendas, but I can't just take things at face value, without looking into it first either. So, just like Naru-chan, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, until we can prove, or disprove your story. That's all I can ask for right now, I guess, but I hope I can prove myself to all of you soon, because I want to get to know the family that was stolen from me. Now if you'll excuse me, Tsunade-sama, I think it's time I start doing that right now," said Kushina, as the talk with Tsunade seemed to ease her nerves, so she did a quick bow and then headed off towards Naruto. As Tsunade watched Kushina walk off, she just shook her head and thought, "I don't know if I should wish you luck, or not, Kushina. I mean, do you intend on taking him away from me, or do you just want to become another part of our family?" As Kushina approached Naruto, he continued to read the scroll until he heard her say, "So Naruto-kun, I hear that you're reading up on seals. If you like, once we get to the village, I'll take you to our old estate, and we can find some of your father's writings on Fuinjutsu." Naruto thought about it for a long time before he looked up at Kushina and said, "Sure, what have I got to lose, and if it will help me find a way to help Anko-ni-chan, then I'm all for it." "You care about Anko-chan very much, don't you?" said Kushina as she got a sad look in her eyes. "Yes, I do. She was one of the first people to actually take an active interest in my welfare. After I met her, she started to spend a lot of her free time with me, and even started to train me in the art of the shinobi. So, I'll do whatever it takes to help her out," said Naruto as he looked Kushina in the eyes. Kushina was doing her best to suppress her tears as she said, "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I wish I could have been there for you when you needed me the most." When Naruto heard this, he closed up his scroll and looked Kushina in the eyes once more before he said, "Wishing you could change a mistake in the past is pointless. Instead, you should focus on making sure that you don't repeat those mistakes." He then stood up and started to walk away, but after a few steps he came to a stop, closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He then opened his eyes and turned to look over his shoulder at a depressed Kushina before he said, "I'm sorry." Kushina's head shot up with a confused look on her face as she started to fear the worst. "Why you're sorry?" Naruto's gaze never faltered as he continued, "About yesterday, now don't get me wrong, I meant every word I said. What I'm sorry about, is the manner in which I said it. With everything that happened yesterday, I was kind of overwhelmed, and when I met you, all my frustration and anger just came to the surface. So, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about my conduct yesterday." For a reason she couldn't explain, Kushina got a smile on her face as she said, "It's alright Naruto-kun, I understand, I just hope I can prove myself to you, and the others soon." "We'll see," said Naruto as he turned to face forward and then continued on toward the rest of the group. As Kushina watched Naruto's retreating form, she felt a fierce determination well up inside of her as she thought, "I don't care what it takes, but I will prove myself to you Naruto-kun." That's a promise. Several hours later, the group of traveling shinobi had just reached a hilltop that overlooked Konoha, when Kushina suddenly pulled a mask out of her back pouch and puts it on. She then ties her hair into a low ponytail. Once she was finished fixing her look, she noticed that everyone had a confused expression on their faces as they looked at her. So she just shrugged her shoulders and said, "What? I just don't want anyone to know who I am, at least, not until we talk to the old man." Tsunade just shook her head and motioned everyone to continue on. "Let's just get going, I want to get the meeting with Sarutobi-sensei over with as soon as possible." A few minutes later at the gates to Konoha. As the group approached the gates, two Chunin guards put up their hands in a stopping motion and said, "Halt. Please present your ID, and state your reason for coming to Konoha." That's when Jiraiya stepped forward and said, "It's alright guys, me and Anko here, were ordered by Hokage-sama, to find and bring back Tsunade and her companions, so he could have a word with them." One of the guards looked at all the people that were with Jiraiya, when he recognized one of Tsunade's companions to be none other than missing Nin Zabuza Momochi, as well as two other shinobi of unknown origin. That's when he pulled out his kunai and said, "I'm sorry Jiraiya-sama, but we can't allow that missing Nin to have free access to our village, so we're going to have to put him under arrest." Anko was very irritated at this point, so she got a pissed off look on her face and pulled out her own kunai before she said, "Are you trying to impede us in our mission? Because if you are, not only will I make your life a living hell, but I'll also inform Hokage-sama that you're the reason that our mission failed." It was at this point that Jiraiya put his hand on Anko's shoulder and said, "Easy now Anko, we don't want to do anything we'll regret later." "Humph, speak for yourself Jiraiya," said Anko as she got a sneer on her face. Jiraiya just shook his head and then turned to face the two Chunins before he said, "Look, I don't know how much longer I can hold her back, so why don't you just leave them in my care, and I'll take full responsibility if anything happens, okay?" The guard got a nervous look on his face before he said, "Very well Jiraiya-sama, we will let you take Zabuza into custody, but these other shinobi will have to wait here, if they don't have the proper identification. Then there won't be any problems, you see, we have the proper identification," said Kushina as she and Shadow pulled out their IDs and then continued with, "You see, our village will be participating in the upcoming Chunin exams, and we are here to finalize the arrangements." The Chunin guard looked over their papers before he returned them and said, "Well, everything seems to be in order, but you need to abide by our laws, while you're visiting our village. If you do that, then there won't be any problems. Don't worry, we won't cause any trouble while we're here," said Kushina as she put her papers away. After the group got past the front gate, they made their way to the Hokage Tower. As they traveled down the street, several villagers would give them curious glances, and a couple even did a double take when they noticed Naruto before they simply shook their heads and say, "Nah. That can't be the demon, he died a long time ago." A little further down the street, Naruto noticed the Ichiraku's ramen stand. His eyes widened as he walked toward the stand and said, I remember this place. As Naruto walked up to the stand, Tsunade made a motion for everyone to wait there as she followed Naruto. She was curious as to what drew him to this one particular stand. When Haku saw Tsunade walk off and make a wait here motion, she got a curious expression on her face as she said, where are they going? Anko just got a smile on her face as she too noticed the ramen stand and said, they're heading to the Ichiraku ramen stand, over there. Humph, we have more important things to do than have him indulge his unusual appetite for ramen, said Zabuza as he crossed his arms. It's not like that. That place was the Gaki's safe haven back when he was a child. It was the one place he could go and be treated like a regular person. No harsh glares, no rude comments, none of that. He was just a regular child to them, said Anko as she gave Zabuza a stern look. Haku got a smile on her face as she looked at the stand and thought, Naruto-kun, at least you had one place here that didn't see you as the Kyuubi. Kushina had remained quiet during Anko's explanation, but once Anko finished, Kushina just started to walk toward the ramen stand determined to see the people that held no grudge against her son. When Naruto reached the stand, he pushed back the curtain and looked at the counter and noticed a picture propped up in the left-hand corner. Naruto then proceeded to pick up the picture and look at it, for it was a picture of himself as a small boy, with Anko sitting on his left side, a small girl, who looked to be around 8 years old, sitting on his right side, and the owner of the stand was standing behind all three of them. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he said, I can't believe they still have this. Can't believe they have what, Naru-chan? Asked Tsunade as she walked up behind him and looked over his shoulder. Tsunade couldn't help but smile as she saw the picture. She then put her hand on his shoulder and said, well, it looks like you had some happy time here after all, huh, Naru-chan? Yeah, this was the one place I could go and not feel hated all the time, said Naruto as he got a reflective look in his eyes. That's when the stand waitress came out from the back and said, sorry for the wait, how can I help you today? Hey. Put that back. If you came here just to torment us, then you might as well leave right now. Naruto turned to look at the waitress, and when he saw the look in her eyes, he looked back at the picture he was holding, and when he saw the same look in the little girl's eyes, his own widened even more as he turned back to face her and said, Ayame-chan. How do you? It can't be, said Ayame in disbelief as her eyes widened and she took a closer look at Naruto. After she looked him up and down, she said, it may be a little longer, but it's still the same spiky blonde hair, same deep blue eyes, and those whisker marks are unmistakable. Why, you're Naruto-kun, aren't you? Naruto started to rub the back of his head and gave her his trademark foxy grin as he said, yep, it's me. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Ayame-chan? Tears started to stream down Ayame's face as she enveloped Naruto in a hug and said, I can't believe it. How? I mean, they told us you were dead. Before Naruto can even answer, Tsunade said, they thought he was, and he would have been too, if Shizune and myself hadn't found him when we did. Ayame releases the hug, and when she looked at Tsunade, her eyes widened in recognition as she said, you're Tsunade-sama, one of the legendary Sannin, aren't you? And you're the one who saved him. That's right, and I've been looking after our little Naru-chan here ever since, said Tsunade as she walked up to Naruto and started to rub his head. Kasen, shouted Naruto as he got his head away from Tsunade's hand before he looked around the stand and added, hey Ayame-chan, where is old man Tuki? He went out to get some more supplies, but he should be back soon, if you want to wait around. I'm sorry, but we don't have time to wait around. Let's go, Naru-chan, we have to go and meet with Sarutobi-sensei, but once that over with, you can come back and visit if you want, alright, said Tsunade as she got a smile on her face. Naruto just nodded his head and then turned to face Ayame before he said, Sorry Ayame-chan, but I'll come back and visit later. So make sure you're ready, because when I come back, I'll want try every single dish of ramen you have, got it? A smile formed on Ayame's face as she said, you bet Naruto-kun, I'll be sure to have it ready for you, when you return, and when you do, we can catch up and find out what the others been up to, okay? Sure thing Ayame-chan, see you later, said Naruto as he waved goodbye before he lifted the curtain and left the ramen stand. Once they walked past the curtain, Naruto noticed that Kushina had her back resting on one of the wooden beams of the stand. You could see a smile appear behind her mask as looked at Naruto and said, I'm glad to see that not everyone in this village hated you. Yeah, old man Tuki and Ayame-chan always treated me like they would treat anyone else. This was always a place I could go and get away from the hatred, at least for a little while anyway, said Naruto as he continued to follow Tsunade back to the group, before they all headed to the Hokage Tower. A short time later in the reception room of the tower. When they entered the room, Jiraiya walked up to the desk and said, Hokage-sama is expecting us, so could you please let him know we're here? Of course Jiraiya-sama, Hokage-sama has already informed me of your arrival, so you can go right on in, but I was only informed that you would only be bringing Tsunade-sama, and her two traveling companions, Shizune-san, and a boy between the ages of 14 to 15. So the others will have to wait out here until you're done, said the Chunin at the desk. Unfortunately, I can't do that, you see, all of these people are involved with the matter, that Hokage-sama sent us to retrieve Tsunade in the first place. So, I would really appreciate it if you let them all pass. If you're worried about protocol, I'll take full responsibility, said Jiraiya as he waited for a reply. After a few moments of silence, the Chunin said, very well Jiraiya-sama, but I'm putting a note in the log that you are taking responsibility for the other guests. That's fine, said Jiraiya as he led everyone into the Hokage's office. Once everyone was inside the office, they each went to different areas of the room. Zabuza and Haku moved to a couch that was on the right side of the room, with Zabuza choosing to lean against the wall, of course. Kushina and Shadow stood on either side of the big double doors, and Shizune and Naruto stood behind Tsunade, who stood beside Jiraiya and Anko. When Sarutobi saw that everyone was situated, he put down his pipe and got up from his chair and came out from behind his desk and said, I see that you managed to bring back more people than you were originally sent out to get Jiraiya. As Sarutobi spoke to Jiraiya, Anko was using every ounce of willpower she had not to grab Sarutobi and slam him against the wall. It became so bad that she visibly started to shake, and through clenched teeth she said, why? At first Sarutobi couldn't quite make out what Anko had said. So he turned to face her, and that's when he noticed her trembling with rage. Oh, from the looks of it, she knows that Naruto is her half-brother. Anko, you have to understand, you see. Understand? What there to understand? You let me think that my own brother was dead. And I want to know why. Shouted Anko as she started to clench and unclench her fists. Sarutobi let out a deep sigh and then said, look Anko, at the time you were too young to be looking after a baby, so I thought it best to go along with the council's decision. Before the situation could escalate any further, Tsunade grabbed a hold of Anko's arm and said, look Anko, I know how you feel, but now's not the time to be dealing with the reasons for Sarutobi-sensei's decision to hide the truth from us. In case you forgot, we have more pressing matters to attend to. Anko saw the look in Tsunade's eyes and understood what she meant, so she just sighed in defeat and said, you're right Tsunade-sama. With that taken care of, Tsunade turned back to face Sarutobi and said, what is so important, that you had to send Jiraiya and Anko out to get me? Sarutobi gets a serious look on his face and said, it's about Naruto. I kind of figured that Sarutobi-sensei, so I'm still waiting for you to answer my question, said Tsunade as she got an impatient look on her face. Sarutobi gave Tsunade a harsh glare before he continued, "Look Tsunade, it's only a matter of time, before the council finds out about Naruto's survival, and when that happens, some of the council members may try to coerce him into becoming a Konoha shinobi." "Humph, that's not going to happen," said Naruto as he crossed his arms over his chest. Sarutobi got a sad look on his face and said, "Naruto, will you not even consider the possibility of staying here in the village? And why would he want to stay in a place that seems to hate his guts?" said Kushina as she finally made her opinion known. As Sarutobi looked at the masked Kanouchi, he got the feeling that he had met her before, so he narrowed his eyes in a curious manner and said, "Have we met before? And how is it that you know so much about this?" Kushina hardened her gaze at Sarutobi and said, "We've met before, but for now, I'm just a shinobi from Kumorigakure no Sato, who's here to finalize the arrangements for our participation in the upcoming Chunin exams, and as for my knowledge of this, you'll find out soon enough." Kumorigakure no Sato. That's the new hidden village that popped up in the last few years. "Are you trying to get Naruto to join your village?" said Sarutobi as he looked at Kushina with great suspicion. "That has yet to be decided," said Naruto. A look of confusion crossed Sarutobi's face, but before he could vocalize his question, a Chunin messenger entered the room and said, "Forgive my intrusion, Hokage-sama, but you asked to be informed when it was time for the council meeting regarding the Chunin exams." Sarutobi let out a deep sigh before he dismissed the Chunin. He then turned to Tsunade and said, "I'm sorry Tsunade, but it looks like we'll have to finish this discussion another time." Tsunade just got a smile on her face as she said, "That's alright, because I'll be going with you to the council meeting, along with Zabuza and the two shinobi from Kuromi." "What?" said a shocked Sarutobi. "I said we'll be going with you to the council meeting. I going telling the council that I intend to enter Naru-chan in the Chunin exams, and the people from Kuromi have agreed to help me," said Tsunade as she put her hands on her S and gave Sarutobi a "don't question me" look. "So, you're telling me that he'll be representing Kumori during the Chunin exams?" Kushina immediately responded with, "You bet, old man, and he'll show this whole village that it was a mistake to treat him the way they did." Sarutobi gave Kushina a harsh glare and said, "Old man, I don't know how they do it in Kumori, but here in Konoha we don't go around speaking to the village leader that way." Tsunade immediately interjected with, "We don't have time for this. Sarutobi-sensei, once you learn who she really is, her attitude towards the village will make sense, but she doesn't want to do that until we speak with the council. So, could you please lead the way?" "Very well Tsunade, but I'll expect some answers when this meeting is over," said Sarutobi as he pointed his finger at Tsunade. Tsunade just nodded her head before she turned to Naruto and said, "Hey Naru-chan, why don't you, Haku-san, and Shizune, go look around the village while we deal with the council? You can even go and pay that ramen stand owner a visit, so, what do you say?" Naruto thought about it for a moment before he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Sure, and besides, I don't want to be in a room with all those stuck-up council members anyway. But I do that, I want you to tell me everything that happens in there, deal?" A smile formed on Tsunade's face as she said, "You've got yourself a deal Naru-chan. Just don't get into any trouble, I don't want to deal with the council any more than necessary, alright? I'll stay out of trouble, man, you worry too much Kasen," said Naruto as he waved his hand dismissively at Tsunade before he turned to Haku and Shizune. "Well, shall we get going? I can't wait to have some of Ichiraku's ramen, it used to be my favorite when I lived here." After Naruto, Haku, and Shizune left, Jiraiya pulled out his spy glass and jumped onto the window ledge before he said, "Well, since I'm not needed anymore, I think it's time I got back to my research." He then waved goodbye as he jumped off in the direction of the hot springs. Anko then ran over to the window and shouted, "Hey you perverted lazy ass. You were the one Who's supposed to file the mission report? When Jiraiya was no longer in sight, Anko clenched her fists and then headed out of the Hokage office while grumbling, "Damn pervert, leaves me to do all the work. When I get my hand on him, not even Tsunade-sama will be able to identify the remains." Once Anko left the room, Sarutobi grabbed the tip of his hat and pulled it down slightly and said, "Let's go." As they walked to the council room, Sarutobi asked, "Tsunade, I've been wondering, how did you meet Naruto? I mean, you haven't stepped foot inside the village since you first left all those years ago." "You're right, this is the first time I've set foot in the village since I left. So, as you can guess, I didn't meet Naruto here. In fact, I found Naru-chan lying lifeless in the bushes, along the road leading to Tanzuku town. If we hadn't found Naru-chan when we did, he wouldn't be with us now," said Tsunade as she lowered her head and got a sad expression on her face when she said the last part. Tanzuku town. How did he get all the way out there, and in the condition he was in? It was a body dump. The only reason we found him at all was because of two shinobi coming out of the bushes, and then fleeing when they saw us. And that's not all. After we healed him, Naru-chan told us who attacked him. He didn't remember their faces, but he told us that they all had the same eyes, they all possessed the Sharingan. Sarutobi-sensei. Sarutobi's eyes widened in shock as he said, "The Uchiha clan attacked Naruto. But that doesn't make any sense, they were always his biggest supporters on the council." This comment shocked both Tsunade and Kushina. Tsunade was the first to vocalize this, "supporters on the council. What are you talking about?" From what I could gather, it seemed like the council was out to get Naru-chan. While it's true that a great number of them have shown intense hatred for the boy, there are a few clans here that have tried to help stem the hatred, and then there are some who are indifferent about him. It's all really complicated to explain. "So, it best that I just show you," said Sarutobi as they reached the doors to the council chambers. As Sarutobi opened the double doors, he led Tsunade and her party into the council chambers. The council members were stunned to see that Tsunade had returned. As the group reaches the middle of the room, Shikaku Nara was the first to get over his shock and he let out an annoyed sigh and said, "I see the rumors are true, Tsunade-sama has indeed returned to Konoha." Danzo leaned back in his chair and said, "So it seems, Shikaku-san, and I can't help but wonder, what motivated this sudden change of heart? For did she not say that she would never return here? I'm only here so that my son can take the Chunin exams and that's all," said Tsunade as she watched the council with a calculating eye. This comment shocked the council and caused Sume Inuzuka to ask, "But Tsunade-sama, as far as we know you never had children, so how can your son be taking the Chunin exams?" Tsunade looked Sume straight in the eyes and said, "I adopted a child over 9 years ago. This is great, we can put him on the Uchiha's team, and watch them dominate the exams. Think of all the money those two will bring in once everyone sees their skills," said a money-grubbing council member. Inoichi Yamanaka got a serious look on his face as he said, "But the Uchiha's already been assigned a third teammate, and it won't be right to just toss them aside just so Tsunade's son could take the exams." "You're right, Inoichi-san, and besides, my son will never work with that bastard of an Uchiha anyway," said Tsunade in a deadly serious voice. Danzo took this opportunity to ask Tsunade, "Really now Tsunade, is calling the last of the great Uchiha clan a bastard appropriate? I mean, what could that boy have ever done to you that would make you use such language?" Tsunade gave Danzo a harsh glare and said, "Oh, I don't know, how about when he tried to kill my son, and nearly killed his best friend in the process? Those are some serious allegations, Tsunade, surely you have some proof to back it up," said Danzo as he leaned back in his chair. Tsunade never broke her gaze as she said, "I have no physical evidence, but I do have eyewitnesses, namely myself, my assistant Shizune, Zabuza Mimochi, and the Kumari Shinobi Shadow. Then there can be no charges filed, Because as you are aware, Tsunade, no shinobi can be charged with a crime unless there is some kind of physical evidence linking the individual to the crime, said Danzo as a smile appeared on his face. As much as it pains me to say this, he's right, Tsunade-sama. Unless you have some kind of physical evidence, then no charges will be filed against Sasuke Uchiha, said Shuza of the Akamichi clan. Tsunade just grunts and in a sarcastic voice said, "That's just what I expected from you anyway. The same old garbage, honestly you're like a broken record. Tsunade-sama, I know that you are the granddaughter of the Shodai Hokage, and you're one of the legendary Sannin, but you really should be more respectful when talking to us, we are the ruling body of Konoha after all," said Homura Mitokado. "I'll show you more respect when you've earned it," said Tsunade. Hiyashi Hyuga tried to change the subject when he said, "Anyway, Tsunade-sama, would you be kind enough to tell us the name of your son?" Tsunade got a smile on her face as she said, "Gladly, his full name is Naruto Uzumaki." This stunned the council, and that's when the head of the Haruno clan said, "That's impossible. The demon child died over 9.5 years ago." After this was said, a large amount of ki could be felt, coming from both Tsunade and Kushina. A few seconds later, Tsunade looked straight at the Haruno clan head and in a menacing voice said, "Call him that again, and I won't be responsible for the consequences." Danzu's smile never left his face as he said, "But Tsunade-sama, the fact remains that it is true that the denim was killed on October 10, almost 10 years ago, when he was attacked by an unknown group of people, leaving behind an unseemly amount of blood in an alleyway. That might be true, but he didn't die that night, because I saved him from his injuries and then took him in as my own son," said Tsunade as she narrowed her eyes and thought, "How the hell does he know so much about the attack on Naru-chan?" Tsunade's thought stopped when she noticed that both Tsume and Inoichi got smiles on their faces when they heard this. She then looked at the rest of them and noticed that Hiyashi remained as emotionless as ever. Shikaku got a serious look on his face as he seemed to weigh the pros and cons. Shuza of the Akamichi clan looked on with a face of indifference, and the Aburame clan head just remained silent, while Homura, Kaharu, the Haruno clan head, and the remaining civilian members were all visibly upset. What didn't surprise Tsunade was Danzu's reaction to the news. He just sat there completely unaffected by it, as if he already knew what Tsunade was going to say. That's when one of the civilian council members decided to say, "If what Tsunade-sama said is true, then we must execute the demon now, before it has a chance to free itself and destroy us all." Kushina suddenly appeared behind this member and put a kunai to his throat before she said, "If you so much as think that again, you won't live to see the sun rise again." "Got it." Sarutobi appeared beside Kushina and grabbed a hold of her wrist and said, "Enough. Threats like that will not be tolerated. Release him right now, or I'll summon a contingent of Anbu to place you under arrest." "You're lucky the Hokage was here, he just saved your life," said Kushina as she pulled away, and once Sarutobi released her wrist she put the kunai away and then went to stand beside Tsunade once more. "This is all besides the point anyway. This kid isn't even a genin, so he is ineligible for the exams," said Danzo as he got a look of superiority on his face. Kushina just looked straight at him and yelled, "It doesn't matter that he isn't a shinobi of this village, because you have no say if another village chooses him as their representative." This shocked the council yet again, and Tsume looked at Tsunade and asked, "Is this true, Tsunade-sama? Is Naruto really going to represent another village in the exams?" Tsunade got a serious look on her face as she said, "Yes, he is, and I'm going to be that team sensei." "That's not even possible, for you see Naruto is a citizen of Konoha," said Danzo. "That's outrageous. First your village wants nothing to do with him, and now you're telling us what other villages can and can't do in regards to who they chose as their representatives. Konoha has fallen a long way since the time of the Yondaime," said Kushina as got a look of hatred in her eyes. "Good, she's almost there. Just one more push should do it." thought Danzo as he said, "How dare you speak to us in that manner, you low-life trash. Just who do you think you are? Who do I think I am? I'm the one who asked Naruto-kun to represent us in the Chunin exams, I'm leader of Kumorigakure no Sato, but more importantly than that, I'm the one who brought him into this world. I'm his mother, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze," shouted Kushina as she ripped off her mask to reveal her face. "Perfect. Then you admit that you have abandoned your home in Konoha and are now working for a new village. I say you are a traitor, and should be marked a missing nin and executed immediately," said Danzo to the stunned council. "Hold it right there, Danzo. You have no authority over such a matter. Never forget that the council only has jurisdiction over the daily life of the Kalns that live in the village. All matters involving village security are the jurisdiction of the Hokage," said Sarutobi as he thought, "What have I allowed to happen? Homura and Kaharu both told me that Kushina was dead, so I took it at face value, and didn't even look into it. Now I find out that she's really alive. If they lied about that, then what else have they lied about?" Danzo silently seethes and then he said, "Then what is your decision, Hokage-sama? Since Kushina has already been declared dead by the council, she is no longer bound to our laws. So she will not be marked in the bingo book. Is that clear?" ordered Sarutobi with a gaze that indicated that he would tolerate no insubordination on this issue. "Damn you, Sarutobi. You always were too soft-hearted, but maybe I can use this to my advantage," thought Danzo as he remained calm and said, "Very well, Hokage-sama, but that still doesn't change the fact that Naruto is a Konoha citizen. That also became null and void when the council declared him dead as well, so he can do as he pleases," said Sarutobi as a smile formed on his face while he looked at Tsunade. "Damn you, Sarutobi. Very well, I'll concede on that point, but that still doesn't change the fact that Naruto still has no team to compete," said Danzo as he glared at Sarutobi. "Yes, he does. One member is already here, and the other one will arrive with the other applicants from Kumori," said Tsunade as she got a serious look on her face while she thought, "That damn Danzo. He tricked Kushina into revealing herself, and that stunt he pulled with the Uchiha charges, it wouldn't surprise me if he had ordered his, nay, to leave any incriminating evidence, linking him the attack on Naru-chan, behind, so he couldn't be implicated. He will probably just say that they were acting on their own, and that he wasn't responsible." Tsunade's eyes widened as she suddenly realized something. "If I bring up the attack now, I know he'll deny it, and then probably want us to have bodyguards to prevent it from happening again, and someone looking over my shoulder is something I can't afford to have right now. So, I'm going to have to keep quiet about this, at least for the time being." "Well then, I guess that means his team's already disqualified. Did you forget, Tsunade-sama, that a foreign team must all arrive at once, or they won't be allowed to take the exam," said Danzo as the smile never left his face. The moment Danzo finished saying this, Sarutobi looked at him with a harsh but curious gaze while he thought, "What are you planning, Danzo?" Sum and Inoichi both protest, and then Sum said, "You have no right to go about making a decision like that by yourself, Danzo. That call must be made by the committee." "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm on the committee then, isn't it? But, seeing as how he's your adopted son, Tsunade-sama, we'll make an exception this time. We'll allow him to take the exam, but he's only allowed to have the one team member that arrived with him, and no one else." "What? That's ridiculous. In the entire history of the exams there has never been a two-man cell before, it's been ruled too dangerous," shouted Kushina. "And besides, that also must be the call of the committee, not just one of its members," shouted Tsunade as she gave Danzo a death glare. Danzo looked at Tsunade with a superior look on his face before he said, "So we'll put it to a vote. We already know my opinion, and what Hokage-sama will say, so that just leaves Homura-san, and Kaharu-san, so how will you vote?" Needless to say that they both sided with Danzo, which left Naruto one team member short when he takes the exams. Tsunade then looked defiantly at Danzo before she said, "You can't expect me to just accept this. Sarutobi-sensei, surely there's something you can do in this matter." Sarutobi just lowered his head in shame and said, "I'm sorry Tsunade, but I can't overrule the committee on this matter, so Naruto will have to take the exams one team member short." "Fine, have it your way," said Suan. Just looked at the council in disgust before she walked over to the two double doors. When she reached she slammed her fist into the doors, completely knocking them off their hinges. Zabuza's eyes widened a little bit when he saw what Suan had just done and then said out loud, "I'm glad that I'm on her side." Kushina just looked at Danzo and spat at his feet before she and the others made their way over to Tsunade. When they reached her, they kept on walking and went through the busted doors, and as Tsunade herself was about to leave, she turned to the council and said, "You fools will soon realize what a mistake it was to let such a promising shinobi like Naruto slip through your fingers." After Tsunade left, Sarutobi just looked at the demolished doors and said, "I fear we've lost another one of the legendary Sannin. I just pray that your actions didn't cause us to lose the last one." On the streets of Konoha, Naruto, Haku, and Shizune walked down the street heading toward Ichiraku ramen stand, when they heard a commotion, and then they heard a child yell, "Hey! Let me go, you big ape!" Naruto decided to go and investigate, and as he and the others turned the corner, Naruto saw a shinobi in what appeared to be a black cat suit, wearing some kind of makeup, with a female kanouchi with blonde hair tied into 4 pigtails. He then heard someone say, I'm sorry, it was my fault, I was fooling around." "Wait a minute, I know that voice," thought Naruto as he quickly looked in the direction that the voice came from, only to see Sakura. The cat-suited shinobi completely ignored Sakura's plea and said, "Calm down, brat, I just want to play with you a little, while we wait for that nuisance to show up." The blonde-haired kanouchi just placed her hands on her S and said, "Knock it off, Kankuro. You know we're going to get it as it is, so just let the little twerp go. Relax, Tamari, I'm just killing some time until he shows up," said Kankuro as he looked over at Tamari. Tamari just shrugged her shoulders and said, "Whatever, I will not take responsibility for this." Kankuro got a smile on his face and then turned back to the little kid he's holding. As he raises his fist to strike, he said, "Maybe next time you'll learn to respect your elders." Kankuro's fist was just mere inches away from the kid's face when Naruto appeared and grabbed his wrist with his right hand, stopping the attack. Naruto looked Kankuro in the eyes as he said, "You know, I may not be a big fan of Konoha, but I just can't stand by and do nothing, while a bully picks on a little kid." Kankuro had a stunned look on his face for a few seconds before it turned into a smirk and he said, "You talk pretty tough, but you just caught me off guard is all. Once I'm done with the shrimp here, I'll deal with you." Naruto just tightened his grip on Kankuro's wrist, which caused Kankuro to drop the child, who ran over behind Shizune, and dropped to one knee while Naruto said, "Maybe you weren't listening to me, so I'll say it again, I don't like it when I see a bully picking on other people. So I'll give you this one chance to leave peacefully. Will you take it or not?" Kankuro winces in pain and tries to pull his arm free as he said, "Hey Tamari. How about a little help here?" "Huh. Sorry Kankuro, but I'm kind of busy right now," said a nervous Tamari. "Wah," said Kankuro as he turned his head only to see that Haku was behind Tamari, holding he on hand that had gone up to grab her fan, while the other one hand a senbon pointed at Tamari's neck. Haku's gaze never left Tamari as she said, "I think you should take Naruto-kun's advice, and just walk away, you are at a serious disadvantage right now. Now guys, remember what Tsunade-sama said, we're supposed to stay out of trouble, and you two fighting these foreign shinobi, would definitely cause trouble, and I don't want to have to tell Tsunade-sama that you sent these two to the hospital," said Shizune as she tried to defuse the situation. Before Naruto could say anything, he snapped his head toward a tree that was behind Sakura and the kids, and used his free hand to catch a rock which had been thrown at his head. Naruto just lowered his hand and narrowed his eyes at the figure in the tree as he said, "It's been a long time, Sasuke Tem." Sasuke jumped down from the tree and landed in front of Sakura before he said, "What the hell are you doing here, you loser?" Naruto didn't answer, however, as his gaze never left the tree. He then tossed the rock up in the air and caught it again before he threw it at the tree and said, "I know you're there, so you might as well come out." As the rock reached the tree, a wall of sand appeared and stopped the moving projectile. When the sand died down, it revealed a reed-headed boy with a gourd on his back. The boy just looked straight at Kankuro and said, "Kankuro, you're a disgrace to our village." Kankuro and Temari got a look of absolute horror on their faces as Kankuro said, "Gee, Gaara." The sand swirled around Gaara as he moved from the tree to the ground beside Kankuro and Naruto. Kankuro then looked at Gaara and said, "Come on, Gaara, why don't you help us out?" Gaara just glared at Kankuro and said, "It annoys me that you were caught off guard so easily. It makes me wonder why they sent you here." But Gaara, they started it. That little brat ran into me, and then this guy butted in," said Kankuro in his defense. "Shut up, or I'll kill you myself," said Gaara as he shifted his gaze to Naruto and then continued, "Sorry about my friend, now if you'll release them we'll be on our way." Naruto gave Haku a slight nod and they both released their captives. As Gaara and the others turned to leave, Sasuke, who had been silently seething for being ignored for so long, finally said, "Hey you there, state your name, and your reason for being here." Gaara turned to face Sasuke and after a moment's silence he said, "Gaara of the desert, and we're here for the Chunin exams." He then shifts his gaze over to Naruto and said, "And you are?" Naruto just gets a smile on his face and said, "Name's Naruto." Not to be outdone by Naruto, Sasuke got a smirk on his face and pointed at himself as he said, "I'm Sasuke Uchiha." Gaara just stared at him for a moment before he turned around, and as he walked away he said, "Kankuro, Temari, let's go." After the Suna shinobi left, Sasuke just gave Naruto a death glare and stormed off. Sakura got a pissed off look on her face as she yelled, "You jerk. How dare you embarrass Sasuke-kun like that?" Sakura the quickly ran after Sasuke as she yelled, "Wait up, Sasuke-kun." Naruto just shook his head and then looked over at Haku before he said, "I see they haven't changed one bit, and by the way, how am I responsible for that bastard's humiliation?" "Who knows, Naruto-kun, who knows?" said Haku as she just shrugged her shoulders. As Naruto and Haku had their discussion, Shizune knelt down and checked the boy for any injuries. When she found none, she let out a sigh of relief and said, "It looks like you're okay, but you should be more careful in the future." "Shizune Nichan's right, kid. You really got to be more careful, because the next time that happens, we won't be around to help you," said Naruto as he walked up to Shizune and the kid. The 11-year-old boy just shook with rage until he shouted, "I'm not a kid. My name's Konohamaru, and I'm the grandson of the Hokage. So, you better show me some respect, because I'm also going to be the Hokage one day." Naruto just got a far-off look on his face as he said, "Huh. I wonder if I'd be acting like that, if my father had survived." He then turned around and jumped onto a nearby rooftop, leaving a stunned Konohamaru, and a worried Haku and Shizune. Once Naruto was on the rooftop, he started at the Hokage monument and settled on the face of the Yondaime before he thought, "Minato Namikaze, I still can't believe you're my father. I can kind of understand why you'd be willing to sacrifice your own life for those you love, but to curse your own son in the process, I don't know if I could ever do such a thing." Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when Kyuubi said, "Hey Kit, I've been meaning to ask you, what do you think of Kushina-san and Minato?" Naruto remained quiet for quite a while before he answered, "Honestly, I don't really know. All I know about Minato aside from the fact that he's my father, is what I've read in textbooks, and based on my experiences with you, I've learned not to believe everything you read. And as for Kushina, she seems to genuinely feel regret about leaving me to the mercy of the village, but everything I said to her when we first met, still lingers in my mind, so a part of me really hates both of them for what they did to me, while another part. Kyubi got an understanding look on her face as she said, I understand, Kit, you really don't know what to feel right now, do you? No, I don't. But tell me, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive them, like you've forgiven me? Naruto closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh. I don't know, Ba-chan, I just don't know. Danzo stormed into his little sanctuary and said, Damn you, Tsunade. Why didn't you tell them about the assassination attempt on that brat? Since I made sure none of them had any damning evidence against me, I was planning to use that incident to have you under constant surveillance. His eyes then widened in realization before he said, No way. There's no way. You could have anticipated my move, and deliberately kept that information to yourself. If you did, Tsunade, then you're a far more devious than I gave you credit for. Just then a figure wearing a cloak cover in red clouds and a straw hat on his head that came down to completely cover his face, appeared and in an emotionless voice said, So, Tsunade has indeed come back to Konoha. Will this have any effect on our plans? Danzo took a few deep breaths to calm himself down before he said, No, everything is still going according to plan. Good. Make sure you keep it that way, said the emotionless figure as he turned to leave. When the figure started to leave, Danzo decided to see if he would be able to deal with his problem, so he said, I should let you know, the Kyubi vessel is still alive. The figure stopped and as he continued to look forward he said, We were already aware of that. He then took a couple of steps before he stopped again and said, Oh, and by the way. As soon as the figure said this, Danzo found a kunai pressed against his neck as a clone of the figure appeared behind him, and then the clone finished the sentence, Did you really think that we wouldn't discover your treachery regarding the Kyubi container? The figure then pressed the kunai even harder against Danzo's neck as he the same emotionless voice continued, You're just lucky that the leader still finds you useful, so you'll just get a warning this time, but betray us again, and you won't have time to regret it. Understand? Danzo just nodded his head as the clone turned into many crows, and as he brought his hand up to his neck he heard the figure say, Leave Naruto-kun alone, we'll deal with him. Danzo looked around the room and saw no sign of the figure. Danzo then took his hand off of his neck and brought it in front of his face. After he stared at it for a little while he clenched his fist and thought, Damn you, Itachi. Once I find what I'm looking for, not even the Akatsuki leader will stand a chance against nay. After the council meeting, word quickly spread throughout the village of Tsunade's return as well as the demon brat's survival. While the people were happy to have one of the Sannin return home, they were less than enthused about Naruto's. They even went to the trouble of organizing a protest group and then went to go see the Hokage, and demanded that the demon child be put to death. Needless to say, the Hokage refused their request, and then reminded them that the law regarding Naruto was still in effect, and he would make sure that the penalty would be enforced, should it be broken. This completely stunned the civilian populace, and since the Hokage wouldn't take any legal action to help them, they went back to treating him like a piece of trash, and once again started to refuse him service. This act soon caused an incident in which Tsunade ended up completely demolishing a table, when the waiter said that this place did not cater to his kind. This soon caused rumors to spread that the demon had somehow bewitched their beloved Sannin. Now just 4 days after his arrival we find Naruto on his way to go meet Anko, and see how Hinata's training was going. As Naruto walked down the street he noticed all the hateful stares, and then let out a deep sigh as he thought, I really hate it here, it took these people less than a day to start treating me like they used to. You'd think that they would have forgotten about me by now. Remember, Kit, a hatred that ran as deep as theirs isn't easily forgotten, but look at the bright side, at least now we know that not everyone on the council is against you. That's not much of a bright side. I mean, sure, Kasen told me that at least 2 of them appeared to be on my side, and another 3 to 4 acted indifferently when they heard the news, but that still leaves at least 7 of them that either want me imprisoned, or worse, dead. Not a very promising situation in my opinion. The only reason they haven't tried anything is because I'm here representing another village, and as long as I don't cause any trouble, they can't touch me. As soon as Naruto finished those thoughts, he tilted his head to the left to avoid a rock that had been thrown his way. When Naruto looked in the direction of the rock's origin, he saw a middle-aged man standing there with a look of pure hatred in his eyes. The man just narrowed his eyes and shouted, "Why don't you just go back to hell where you belong?" Naruto just shook his head and continued on his way as he thought, "I can't wait till this exam is over, and I get to leave this place." As Naruto was about to turn a corner, he suddenly heard a loud scream coming from the direction of the bathhouse. Naruto just shook his head as he thought, "Ero Sennin, what trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" That's when he saw a pink-haired Sasuke in nothing but his underwear, skid a couple of inches as he ran around the corner and then went as fast as he could while he discarded a piece of rope that was hanging on his arm. Naruto just stood there in shock as Sasuke ran right past him. That's when Naruto heard a noise coming his way and turned his head just in time to see a horde of fangirls led by Sakura, who shouted, "Oh Sasuke-kun. I knew you liked me. Come around the corner." He was just barely able to jump out of the way and land on a nearby rooftop as the horde came barreling through. As the dust settled, Naruto just stared in the direction that they went, and after he blinked a couple of times he started to laugh. Once Naruto had calmed down, he said, "Man, I needed that. I'm going to have to get the whole story from Anko Nichan when I see her." A short time later, Naruto made it to the wooded area that Anko said she would be at when suddenly a kunai landed at Naruto's feet. He picked it up and then looked up into the trees. That's when he saw Hinata barely dodge a kunai that came flying at her. This dodge caused her to land on the ground a few feet away from Naruto. Before she could even completely stand up, Anko appeared behind her and threw her back up into the trees as she said, "Didn't I tell you that you couldn't touch the ground?" I'm sorry, Anko-sensei," said a meek Hinata as she grabbed onto a tree branch and pulled herself up. The moment that Hinata straightens herself, Anko throws 3 more kunai at her. She is able to dodge one of them, but the second one ripped right through her coat and the third one nicked her cheek. Naruto winces when he sees Anko appeared in front of Hinata and deliver a solid punch to her stomach. "Man, Anko Nichan, I know you've been training her for 3 days and all, but do you have to be so vicious? Kid, she just trying to help her. I mean, after all, she used this training method with you, and look how good you turned out." "That's different, Ba-chan. I didn't have the mental problems that Hinata has." Just as Naruto finished that thought, Hinata lands on her back in front of him, breathing heavily. A few seconds later, Anko also lands on the ground and said, "Not bad, you've at least gotten better since yesterday, but you still need to work your speed." "Hey Anko Nichan, I ran across Sasuke on my way here, and I got to say, the pink hair was a nice touch," said a smiling Naruto as he took the lull in the training to make his presence known. Anko then looked up and noticed Naruto. She got a smile on her face as she said, "Hey Gaki. You like that, huh? Just wait and see what else I got planned for him, heh, heh, heh. Anyway, I see you've got yourself a shadow." She then pointed to Konohamaru, who was hiding behind a tree. Naruto just lowered his head and let out a sigh before he said, "Yeah, I know, he's been following me around, even since I saved him from the group from Suna. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and it's really starting to irritate me. But enough about him, do you think we could talk in private?" When Anko looked into his eyes, she knew what he wanted to talk about, so she just nodded her head and then turned to Hinata and said, "We're going to take a short break, so rest up and be ready for when I get back." Hinata just nodded her head because she was too tired to say anything. After Anko said this, she and Naruto jumped up into the trees, and once they were high enough sat down on a branch. "Let me guess, Gaki, you want to know more about Kushina, don't you?" asked Anko. "Yeah, with Kasen and Kushina both on their way to see the old man, and I figured this would be the perfect time to learn about her from someone I can trust," said Naruto. After a few seconds of silence, Anko finally said, "Fine, Gaki, I'll tell you what you want to know, but you're going to treat me for dango later, deal?" Naruto made a gulping sound, for he knew that Anko loved dango as much as he loved ramen, so after careful consideration he knew he had no other choice, so he said, "This is going to put a major dent in my finances, but I've got to know." "You've got a deal, Anko Nichan." Anko got a smile on her face when she thought about all that lovely dango she was going to have later, and after a few seconds of daydreaming, Naruto brought her out of it by jabbing her in the arm, and then she said, "Alright, what do you want to know? First off, was she always the way she is now, or is she just putting on an act, so that I'll trust her?" asked Naruto. "It's not an act. Even when I was a kid, she was always like this. In fact, after my mother was killed, she practically became a second mother to me." Naruto just tilted his head back as he said, "I see, but that still doesn't explain why she didn't know about you, Anko. Didn't she say that she had contacts in the village?" Anko thought about it for a little bit before she said, "That bothered me too, but they might not have known that I was the Yondaime's daughter, and on top of that, they probably weren't ordered to find out if I was alive. You see, not too long after his death, the council stripped me of my right to use his clan name. At the time they said it was for my own protection. Later on, when I got older, they told me that I could never take his clan name. When I protested this, they told me that since I was the last of the clan, and under suspicion of treason after Orochimaru's defection from the village, they had the power to revoke my clan status, as well as keep all the clan's jutsu locked up under the Hokage's protection. That explains why Kasen and Kushina are going to talk to the old man," said Naruto, and when he noticed Anko's confusion he added, "A couple of days ago, Kushina took me to the clan compound, only to find out that they have fenced it off, and turned it into some kind of training ground. Not only that, but all the clan belongings have been removed from the complex." Needless to say, Kushina was really pissed. "Oh, it looks like Hinata has recovered," said Naruto as he looked down to see that Hinata had gotten back to her feet. When Anko saw this, she simply rubbed her hands together and said, "Well, looks like the break is over, time to get back to the torture, training." Naruto just shook his head before he said, "Go easy on her, Anko Nichan, don't forget that she has low self-esteem." "Hey, I am going easy on her, I've only been using kunai as projectiles. Don't you remember, I was using explosive tags by this time with you," said a defensive Anko. A small shiver ran down Nato's back as he remembered those training sessions. He then said, "I remember, but I also remember when Kasen found out about that, it took both Shizune Nichan and myself to save you from her wrath." Anko brought her right hand up to her left shoulder and stood up before she said, "I remember, my shoulder hurt for a full month after she got a hold of me. Anyway, I have to get back to the training, so you'll have to take me to the dango shop later." "That's fine, I have to get going as well. I have to meet up with Haku-chan and Zabuza-sensei, so I can continue my sword training," said Naruto as he watched Anko jump down to the ground before he himself took off to find Zabuza and Haku. Tsunade and Kushina were on their way toward the Hokage Tower, when Kushina looked over at Tsunade and asked, "Tsunade-sama, back when we met with the council, why didn't you tell them about the incident back in Tanzuku town? Isn't it obvious? After the way the Danzo reacted when we told him about Sasuke's attempted murder of Naru-chan, and then the way he tricked you into revealing who you were. He'd probably deny any involvement in it and claim that they acted on their own, and then he'd probably want us to be under constant surveillance so that it wouldn't happen again, and if that happened, we'd never figure out what's going on. Speaking of which, how's Shadow's End coming along? Said Tsunade as she kept her voice down so that no one else could hear her. Kushina discreetly looked around to make sure nobody was listening in before she said, his progress has been slow, he has managed to get in touch with my contacts, but none of them have any new information we can use. It's going to take him some more time before he gets any useful information. Tsunade and Kushina both quieted down as they passed a couple of Konoha shinobi, and once they were out of earshot Tsunade said, I hope he finds something soon, the Chunin exams are due to start in just 3 more days, at which point I'll be expected to wait with the other team senseis, until they have completed the first 2 parts of the exam, so, it will be up to you and Jiraiya then. I know Tsunade-sama, we will get to the bottom of this, and when we do, we can take Naruto-kun away from this place, so he never has to feel hated again, said a determined Kushina. Well Kushina, I'm starting to think, that you just want to be a part of our family after all, thought Tsunade as a smile formed on her face. After that they ended their conversation until they reached the Hokage Tower. Hokage Tower Hokage's office. Sarutobi was at his desk working on this morning's paperwork, when he heard a knock at the door before his Chunin secretary popped her head in before she said, Hokage-sama, Tsunade-sama and Kushina-san are here, and they would like a moment of your time. Very well, send them in, said Sarutobi as he brought his hands up to his chin and wondered what those two could want. As Tsunade and Kushina took their seats in front of the Hokage's desk and waited for the Chunin to leave before Kushina got a serious look on her face and said, Sarutobi, I'd like to get back the clan scrolls that were taken from the Namikaze compound. Sarutobi let out a sigh before he said, I figured as much, and I'll give you what we were able to salvage, from the Jutsu vault. This caught both of them off guard and then Tsunade asked, salvage? Yes, salvage, about 11 years ago, when the council barred Anko from taking back her clan name. I went with some of my most trusted shinobi to retrieve what was in the vault, only to discover that someone had broken into it and taken a few items. Among them were some Fujin technique scrolls, a couple of those special 3-prong kunai, and some other assorted items ranging from simple jutsu scrolls to pieces of equipment, but the worst part of it, is that the scroll containing Hiraishin no Jutsu Flying Thunder God technique, was taken as well. I spent all these years trying to find out who did it. At first I thought it was Anko, but after an extensive investigation, we discovered that the seals protecting the vault were completely destroyed, and not simply deactivated. Meaning that it wasn't Anko, but whoever did this had to be extremely skilled, said Sarutobi in a grave voice. Well then, I guess it's a good thing that Minato-kun left a fake in that vault after all, said Kushina as a smile appeared on her face. Sarutobi got a curious look on his face before he said, fake? Are you trying to tell me that the Yondaimi's special jutsu wasn't taken after all? Kushina looked Sarutobi straight in the face as she said, oh no, it was taken, I took it from here the night that I left, so it's safely locked away. Minato-kun intended to teach his children that jutsu one day when they gained enough skill, but after I was told of their deaths, and the subsequent attack on my life I figured that it would be best if I took it with me. So you're telling me that the ones who broke into the vault only got a fake and you have the original? Asked Sarutobi as he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw her nod. Yes, all they got was the very early writings, and ideas on what the jutsu could do, so it's practically worthless, conformed Kushina. That's good to know, and don't worry, I'll have all the scrolls transferred to your place of residence by the end of the day, said Sarutobi. It was at this point that Tsunade decided to bring something to Sarutobi's attention, so she said, Sarutobi-sensei, there's something you should know, but before I tell you, you have to promise me that you'll keep it from the council until I can prove it, okay? Curiosity got the best of Sarutobi, so he nodded his head in agreement, and that's when Tsunade continued with, before we left to come here, we were attacked by a group of, Anbu. We believe that they were ordered by Danzo to kill Naruto, for a yet unknown reason. I see, said Sarutobi as he leaned back in his chair and took up a thinking position. Now I understand why he was so adamant about Naruto taking the Chunin exams, with only one teammate. If your suspicions are correct, then Danzo will most likely make another attempt during the exams, considering it's quite common for deaths to occur. So if there is anything I can do to help, just let me know. Thanks, Sensei, but I don't think that would be a good idea. You may have spy in your midst. How else could Danzo have known about Naru-chan's survival, and then track us down to Tanzuku town at the same time that you sent Jiraiya and Anko-san to get us? Said Tsunade as she contemplated what to do next. Kushina just looked Sarutobi in the eyes before she added, Tsunade-sama's right, if you start to poke around it might alert Danzo, and then he'll make things difficult for us. So it's for the best, if you just sit back, and let us look into this. Sarutobi just sat there for a moment and thought over the matter, and when he came to a decision he said, very well, I'll let you handle the investigation, and when you find some evidence that links Danzo behind this assassination, bring it to me immediately, and I'll make sure that he is punished to the full extent of the law. Why are you so willing to help Naruto-kun now? Why stick your neck out for the boy this village abandoned? Asked a very serious Kushina. After he let a deep sigh and with a sad look on his face, Sarutobi said, I'm just correcting a mistake that I made a long time ago. Kushina looked into Sarutobi's eyes and sees the sincerity in them, so she just nodded her head and said, all right, we'll trust you for now, but if you do anything to destroy that trust, I understand. You'll do what you deem necessary to protect those you care for. It's a shame that you didn't stay in the village, Kushina. You would have made a fine Hokage, said Sarutobi as he leaned forward and rested his chin on the back of his hands. Kushina remained silent and just nodded her head, as she and Tsunade stood up and said their goodbyes before they left. After the doors had closed behind the two, Sarutobi once again leaned back in his chair and thought, Danzo, what are you really after? Back with Naruto. As Naruto walked down another street that led back to Tsunade's clan house, he noticed that he was still being followed by Konohamaru. So he let out a deep sigh, came to a complete stop, turned around and looked at the badly camouflaged Konohamaru before he said, this is really irritating, you've been following for the past 3 days, and I want to know why. Konohamaru didn't respond at all and just remained behind his camouflage. A confused Naruto just looked at the camouflaged Konohamaru and said, you do realize that I know they're right? That's when Konohamaru lowered his disguise. He pointed at Naruto and said, you're pretty good to see through my disguise. So, it wasn't a fluke when you saved me from those bullies the other day. Naruto just looked at Konohamaru like he was a little crazy, before he took a deep breath and said, look kid, I'll say it again, why are you following me? Konohamaru completely ignored Naruto's question and said, alright, I've decided. Teach me your skills. I'll become your apprentice. Huh, was all a confused Naruto could say. Before Naruto could say anything else, Konohamaru shouted, you've got to teach me how you were able to injure that guy's wrist with just one hand. No way kid, that technique is too dangerous for someone with your control level, and besides it's kind of become a family technique, said Naruto. Oh come on, you've got to teach me something. Otherwise how will I become the next Hokage? Shouted Konohamaru as he got into Naruto's face. Naruto's eyes widened for a split second when he heard Konohamaru mention his old dream again. His eyes then narrowed slightly as he said, look kid, no means no, so if that's all, I'll see you around. Naruto then waved his hand at Konohamaru while he turned around and started to walk down the street. Wait. This caused Naruto to stop once again. He then looked over his shoulder and said, "What?" Konohamaru lowered his head and in a low voice said, "If you're not going to train me, then can you at least tell me what you meant when you said, 'I wonder if I'd be acting like that if my father had survived'?" "That's none of your business," said a defensive Naruto as he started to walk away. Konohamaru ran in front of him and said, "Come on, you've got to tell me. Was your father the Kage of another village? Since your father didn't survive, were you raised by someone who trained you right? Was he HMMMPPHH?" Naruto put his hand over Konohamaru's mouth as he leaned in and said, "Look, I really don't want to talk about it. So, why don't you just drop it?" Just as Naruto had finished this statement, he heard a voice say, "Ah. There you are, Naruto-kun. We've been looking all over the place for you." Naruto looked up to see Haku and Zabuza walking up to him, and when they got within a few feet, Zabuza said, "Let's go, you're late for your training." "Hi, Zabuza-sensei," said Naruto as he took his hand off of Konohamaru's mouth and then added, "Sorry kid, but I've got to get going, so take care of yourself, okay?" "Oh no you don't. I'm sticking to you like glue, until you tell me what I want to know." When Naruto saw the same look of determination in Konohamaru's eyes that he would see every morning when he looked into a mirror, he came to a decision and said, "Do whatever you like, Konohamaru, but don't get your hopes up, I don't plan on telling you anything." A smile appeared on Konohamaru's face when he heard Naruto call him by his name. After he recovered from this shock, he said, "That's where you're wrong, boss. I plan on getting you to tell me everything you know." "Boss," said Naruto in a curious voice before he just shook his head while he waved his hand in a following motion before he continued with, "Whatever. Come on, let's get going. I want to show Zabuza-sensei a couple of new tricks I've come up with." As everyone headed to their designated training ground, Haku just smiled when she saw the hero words in Konohamaru's eyes. Ha! He only met Naruto-kun a few days ago, and without knowing anything about him, Konohamaru already wants to become his friend. It's a shame that the rest of Konoha can't see what kind of person Naruto-kun really is. Several minutes later at the training field, Naruto and Zabuza had been going at it for a little while when Naruto just barely managed to dodge a sword strike that was aimed at his head. He quickly countered with a quick upward slash to the head, which Zabuza easily dodged, but the moment Naruto finished the upward motion, he did a quick slash downwards, barely missing Zabuza's face. As Zabuza moved away from Naruto, his eyes widened in shock when he saw a cut appear on his cheek. His eyes quickly looked at the Kodachi. That's when he noticed that the wind around the edge of the blade was in a hooked pattern before it moved back into a straight extension of the blade. A slight smile appeared underneath his mask as he said, "Not bad, brat. I must say that you surprised me with your wind manipulation there." A smile appeared on Naruto's face as he said, "You like that, huh? Just wait until you see what else I've got up my sleeve. Then show me," said Zabuza as he tightened his grip on his sword and charged Naruto. While Zabuza trained Naruto, Haku and Konohamaru watched from the sidelines. A few minutes into the spar, Konohamaru turned to Haku and asked, "Hey lady, you know the boss pretty well, right? So could you tell me what he meant when he said, 'I wonder if I'd be acting like that if my father had survived'?" Haku sat there for a moment before she said, "Naruto-kun wouldn't tell you, would he?" Konohamaru just nodded his head in confirmation, and that's when Haku let out a breath before she said, "Fine, I'll tell you a little about it, but to get the full story you'll have to talk to Naruto-kun." After Konohamaru gave another nod, she continued, "Very well, let's begin. As you may have noticed, this village doesn't like Naruto-kun very much. In fact, most of them downright hate him, but what most of them don't know is that his father was a very famous shinobi from this village, but when Naruto-kun was born something happened, and because of what his father did, he was revered as a hero, while Naruto-kun was greeted with hatred. So, it's understandable that he has mixed feelings when it comes to his father, and sometimes he wonders if things would have been different if his father had lived. A sad expression crossed Konohamaru's face as he said, "It must have been hard for him, living with all that hatred." Yes, it was, but Naruto-kun persevered through it, and found people who care about him deeply, said Haku when Naruto suddenly landed in front of them. After he got to his feet, Naruto shook his head a few times while he brought his hand up to his head before he said, "Ow. Hey, I thought you said no blows to the head. Fool, the only rule on the battlefield is that there are no rules," said Zabuza as he readied himself for Naruto's counterattack. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, then here I come," shouted Naruto as he tightened his grip on his Kodachi and charged Zabuza. Zabuza blocked Naruto's strike and countered with his own, which Naruto managed to block and then countered with a spinning heel kick aimed directly at Zabuza's head. Zabuza ducked at the last second and rolled out of the way to get some distance, so it would be to his advantage, while a smile once again appeared behind his mask as he thought, "Damn, this kid's gotten better, he's actually become a challenge." As Naruto launched his next assault, he got a familiar feeling of dread which caused him to stop in his tracks. He then said, "Hang on, Zabuza-sensei, we're being watched." He then turned and looked behind Haku and Konohamaru and said, "Alright, I know that you're there, Sasuke-tem, so you might as well come out." "So, I see the report was true after all. It seems that your childhood experiences have given you the ability to sense the Sharingan," said Itachi as he and his partner walked into the training zone. Naruto looked at this newcomer as Zabuza appeared beside him, while Haku and Konohamaru moved away from the intruders, and made their way over to Naruto and Zabuza. Once they got behind him, Naruto narrowed his eyes at Itachi and said, "You're not Sasuke-tem, so you must be his older brother Itachi." As Itachi nodded his head, his partner took one look at Zabuza before a grin crossed his face and said, "Well, if it isn't the young pup Zabuza. I heard that you recently had a spar with Sharingan, Kakashi. Could that possibly be true? And what of it, fish face?" said Zabuza as he glared at Itachi's partner. "Fish face. Now is that any way to greet me after all this time? I think you need a lesson in manners, pup," said Itachi's partner as he reached for his sword. It was at this point that Itachi stepped in and put his arm in front of him and said, "Calm down, Kisame. We didn't come here to start a fight. I know, we came to get the brat right," said Kisame as he pointed at Naruto. While Itachi just nodded his head, Naruto analyzed the situation. "This is not good. From what Anko Nichan told me, Itachi is an S-ranked criminal, and from what I can tell, his partner is no pushover. Damn it. Why the hell do all these really strong shinobi pop up out of the woodwork whenever Ka-san and the others aren't around? We could really use their help right now." Naruto then moved closer to Haku and whispered, "Haku-chan, I want you to take Konohamaru and get out of here. Go and find some help, we're going to need it." "But Naruto-kun, I can't just leave you and Zabuza-sama here. Please let me stay and help you," said Haku as she watched Itachi and Kisame. "Haku-chan, we can't leave Konohamaru here, it's too dangerous, and we also need someone to go and get some help. I can't do it, it seems they're after me, and it looks like Zabuza-sensei has a past with the fish face over there, so it's unlikely that he'll let him leave. That just leaves you, and there's no one else I'd rather have do this, because I know you'll get it done," said Naruto as he looked over at Haku. When Haku saw the look in Naruto's eyes, she nodded her head and said, "Alright, Naruto-kun, I'll take Konohamaru to safety, but I want you to promise me that you'll hold out until I can get back with help, okay?" "That's a promise," said Naruto as a smile crossed his face before he looked back at Itachi. It was at this point that Itachi noticed Haku pick up Konohamaru, who shouted in protest, and headed off toward the village at her top speed. Haku had almost made it to the tree line when Itachi appeared in front of her and said, "I can't let you leave." "That's not your call," shouted Naruto as he appeared behind Itachi and tried to stab him with his kodachi. Itachi quickly rotated his body and grabbed a hold of Naruto's wrist and with a quick twist broke Naruto's wrist, which caused him to drop his sword. Itachi then looked down at Naruto and as he released Naruto's wrist he said, "Not bad, you appear to have some skill with a blade. It would seem that you've learned how to use the hatred in your heart to become stronger." Naruto ignored Itachi's comments and screamed out in pain as he grabbed his wrist. He then looked at Haku, who was still rooted in place from when Itachi appeared in front of her, and that's when Naruto shouted, "What the hell are you waiting for? Get out of here now." Haku looked over at Naruto, before she nodded her head and then with Konohamaru in her arms once again tool off toward the village. That's when Itachi said, "You cannot escape." But before Itachi could even take one step Naruto was in front of him, his left hand still holding his right wrist, and as a green glow encompassed his hand he glared at Itachi before he said, "The only way you're going to stop them, is over my dead body." Itachi took up a non-aggressive posture and said, "We didn't come here to fight you, Naruto-kun. We've been ordered to extend you this offer. We'd like you to come and join our group." "And why should I join you? I mean, after what you just did, why should I believe anything you say?" said Naruto as he finished healing his wrist. "For this simple reason, Naruto-kun, I've been authorized to offer our assistance, when you decide to get revenge on the ones who shunned you," said an emotionless Itachi. "What? You can't be serious," said a shocked Naruto. Itachi's face remained blank as he said, "We know all about your past here, Naruto-kun. You can't be subjected to that kind of hatred, and not want revenge." Naruto just looked Itachi in the eyes and said, "While I won't deny that I hold no love for this place, I've no desire to see them dead. I'm a medic first and foremost, so I won't take a life, unless I absolutely have to. I see Tsunade has influenced your behavior. That's too bad. If you refuse to see this place for what it is, then I'll have to make you realize it by force," said Itachi as he shook his head and let out a sigh before he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and captured Naruto with his Tsukuyomi. What the hell just happened?" said a shocked Zabuza as he saw both Naruto and Itachi go motionless. "Hey, it looks like your little friend is done for, Zabuza, and with Itachi busy in that little world he created, I get to have my fun with you," said Kisame as his hand went for the handle of his sword while he charged at Zabuza. Naruto shook his head as he slowly opened his eyes and looked at his surroundings before he said, "Where the hell am I?" That's when he noticed that his arms and legs were chained to a cross, and once he looked forward he saw Tsunade, Shizune, Anko, Haku, and Zabuza on their knees with their hands tied behind their backs. Naruto then glanced up and saw Kushina, Sarutobi, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Sasuke all standing behind his family, and that's when he said, "What the hell's going on?" Sarutobi ignored Naruto and said, "For harboring the demon child, and showing him compassion, you are all sentenced to death." Naruto then watched on in horror as Sarutobi plunged the sword he was holding into Shizune's heart. He was soon followed by Jiraiya as he slit the throat of Zabuza. Sasuke was next one as he shoved his kunai into Haku's head and said, "Take that, you demon-loving bitch." Kakashi was next as he plunged a Chidori, thousand birds, into Anko's chest, and then it was Kushina's turn. She looked Naruto in the eyes as she said, "You shouldn't be so trusting, demon," before she chopped Tsunade's head off. "NNNOOOOO!" screamed Naruto as he witnessed the slaughter of his family. Tears then started to stream down his face, when another Kushina appeared before him and stabbed him in the chest, and as he grunted in pain he said, "This has to be a genjutsu, it's not real." "Genjutsu? No. This is the future that you have chosen, and the only way to avoid it, is to join with us. So, what do you say?" said Itachi as he appeared next to Naruto. Naruto turned and glared at Itachi as he said, "Damn you, Itachi. When I get out of this, I'm going to make you pay." Itachi just raised his hand and everything went back to the way it was before the slaughter. He then lowered his hand and as the killing happened again Itachi said, "Very well Naruto-kun, since you've chosen to be so stubborn, you will endure this for the next 72 hours. Naruto screamed in pain as he was impaled by the many blades of Itachi's Kushina. Inside the seal Kyuubi's cage. Kit thought Kyuubi as she was awakened from her nap by the sound of Naruto's scream. Kyuubi then looked outside of her cage only to see some kind of barrier blocking her view. What the hell? After a few unsuccessful attempts at trying to contact Naruto, Kyuubi started to channel her chakra and used it to try and bore a hole through this barrier. While she worked on breaking the barrier she thought, "Damn it. What the hell's this barrier doing here? This would never have happened if I'd been awake. I take one little nap, and the kid manages to get himself into some deep trouble, and until I get this barrier down, the kid's practically on his own. I just hope he can hold on, until I can break through this." With Tsunade and Kushina. Tsunade and Kushina had just sat down to enjoy their sake when Haku suddenly burst in, and after a few deep breaths she put Konohamaru down and said, "Tsunade-san, Kushina-san. You have to come quick. Someone by the name of Itachi is attacking Naruto-kun and Zabuza-sama as we speak." The two women looked at each other for a second before both of them jumped off the coach and ran over to Haku. Once they reached her Tsunade said, "Itachi. Are you sure?" When Haku nodded her head Tsunade added, "Damn it. We have to hurry. If Itachi is after Naruto, then we don't have much time." Kushina turned to Konohamaru and said, "Look kid, I need you to go to the Hokage's office and let him know what happened. Inform him that an S-ranked criminal is loose in the village, got it?" "Hey, I'm not a kid," shouted Konohamaru. "I don't give a damn. Just do it," shouted Kushina. Konohamaru just nodded his head in fear and ran out the door, and once he was out of sight Tsunade turned to Haku and said, "All right Haku-san, lead the way. We have to get there before anything happens to Naruto." "Hi Tsunade-san, it's this way," said Haku as she ran out the door and headed for the training ground with Tsunade and Kushina right on her heels. Back with Naruto. Naruto grits his teeth in pain as Itachi's copy of Kushina stabbed him yet again. It's been over 12 hours since Naruto was captured in this genjutsu, and after he watched his family die over and over again for that length of time, you could start to see the mental strain take effect. When Naruto raised his head he saw that his family was once again set up for their execution, and as he watched the horror once again he thought, "I don't know how much more of this I can take. I know that this is a genjutsu, but I've never encountered one so powerful before, and to make matters worse, it's showing me my greatest fear. Damn it, why can't I contact Ba-chan? I could really use her help right about now." Meanwhile Itachi stood beside Naruto, when he felt something trying to break in. "Ah, I see the Kyuubi has awakened from its slumber. I'm going to have to end this quickly, it won't take her long, to destroy the barrier I placed between them, and when that happens, I won't stand a chance against her wrath." Itachi then turns his attention back to Naruto, only to see that Naruto had turned his head and narrowed his eyes. He then made eye contact with Itachi and said, "Itachi, when I break free of this, no force on earth will save you from my wrath." Itachi just shook his head and intensified the genjutsu before he said, "We are only trying to help you understand the truth Naruto-kun." Naruto screams out in pain as a dozen Kushinas stab him in the chest, before everything reverts back to its original position. As Naruto's head lowered from exhaustion, his sweat-soaked hair covered his eyes, and after he took a couple of deep breaths he said, "This won't stop me Itachi. I will get out of this, and when I do." Why do you refuse to see the truth? It's only a matter of time before they show their true colors and try to kill you. So, Why not just give in and accept our offer? Asked a bewildered Itachi. You think I would just accept this as the truth? I guess you don't know me as well as you thought you did, huh? For starters, Ero Sennin would never go along with this. He would sooner fight all of Konoha than see this happen. Secondly, the old man's the same way. If he was really like this, he would have had me executed the day I was born. Now as for Kakashi, I don't know him very well, so who knows what he would do, and Sasuke, I have no doubt in my mind that he would do this if he had the chance. Now as for Kushina, she may have not been there for me when I was a child, but ever since I've met her all I see when I look into her eyes is nothing but regret, so I know she wouldn't do this. So the only monster here is you, Itachi. You threatened my family in order to make me do what you want. And that's something I won't tolerate. My family took me in and brought me out of the darkness. They saved me from that lonely abyss, so I'll do whatever I have to in order to protect them. And that's why, I'll never give up. The moment Naruto finished saying those words, the necklace that Tsunade gave him started to glow, and as the blue glow encompassed the area, all of Itachi's illusions disappeared until it was just the two of them. Itachi took several steps back when he noticed the sky had started to crack, and that's when he thought, what? This is impossible. He's somehow creating enough power to break free, and with the Kyuubi trying to get in. Before Itachi could even finish this thought, Kyuubi's chakra broke through the cracks in the sky and started to merge with Naruto. As more chakra poured into Naruto, a chakra tail started to emerge, then a second tail emerged, then three. It was at this point that the chains that held Naruto started to give way, and as a fourth tail started to emerge, he broke out of his restraints, when suddenly a brilliant light filled the area. Itachi shielded his eyes from the bright light as he said, impossible. The seal Kyuubi's cage. Kyuubi was just about to break through the barrier. She suddenly saw cracks appear, and that's when she felt a large amount of her chakra start to flow out of the cage and through the cracks in the barrier. Kyuubi's eyes widened when she realized how much chakra was being forced through the seal. Impossible. How can the kid be drawing this much of my chakra? He hasn't even fully mastered the three-tailed form yet, and he's already drawn out the four-tail. Wait, he's drawing out even more. This can't be happening, he's going into his fifth-tailed form. What the hell's going on in there? Back inside Naruto's mind. As the light faded, we find a five-tailed Naruto standing there in all his glory with a strange mixture of blue and red chakra swirling around him. The chakra itself took on an anthropomorphic form of a fox, while Naruto's whisker marks became really dark and menacing, his fingernails became as sharp as knives, and his eyes turned a dark shade of red with a black slit in the middle. Naruto's red eyes focused on Itachi while he raised his right hand and started to channel his chakra before he said, I told you I would get free. This is my mind after all, and you don't belong here. Before Itachi could even react, Naruto appeared right beside him and said, "Begone." As he slammed his reddish-blue Rasengan into Itachi's chest, completely disintegrating the mental representation of Itachi and forcing him back into the real world. In the real world, Kisame and Zabuza's swords had just made contact when a bright blue glow caught their attention. Not even a second later, they felt a huge chakra surge coming from Naruto, and right after that they saw Itachi jerk backwards as if he got punched in the gut, before he dropped down to one knee. Itachi coughed up some blood before he raised his head and made eye contact with Naruto. He then wiped the blood from his lip and said, I underestimated you, Naruto-kun. I didn't think anyone besides another Sharingan user could break out of my Tsukuyomi. Itachi, this may surprise you, but there are only a couple of things that I find unforgivable, and threatening my family, in order to get to me, is one of them. Said Naruto as he flared his chakra and gave Itachi a harsh glare. The moment Naruto finished speaking, he heard Kyuubi say, Kit, what happened behind that barrier? How are you able to channel so much of my chakra? Not now, Ba-chan. This bastard is going to pay for what he forced me watch, thought Naruto as he started to walk towards Itachi. Forced him to watch? Just what happened in there? Thought Kyuubi as she started to get a little concerned. Meanwhile Kisame just stood there in shock as he heard what Itachi's comments to Naruto before he said, that brat was able to break out of Itachi's Tsukuyomi. That's impossible. Apparently not. It seems Naruto has a lot more potential than I gave him credit for. Don't you agree, Tsunade? Said Jiraiya as he landed right beside Zabuza, followed shortly by Haku, Tsunade, Shizune, and Kushina. Tsunade completely ignored Jiraiya as she focused on the glowing jewel around Naruto's neck. What's going on? I thought only Ojiazin's chakra could resonate with the necklace, in order to control Abiju's chakra. While this was going on, Itachi managed to make it to his feet just as Naruto reached him. Naruto then grabbed Itachi by the cloak when he noticed something funny about Itachi's scent. This caused Naruto to narrow his eyes even further as he said, "What's the deal, Itachi? Why can I smell two distinct scents, coming from your body?" Itachi looked at Naruto and noticed the strain on his face. This is when he said, "I see, Kyuubi's chakra is the only thing keeping you from feeling the strain of breaking out of my Tsukuyomi, isn't it?" Naruto ignored Itachi's question and tightened his grip on Itachi's cloak before he said, "Answer my question, damn it. What's the deal with your scent?" Naruto then threw Itachi into a nearby tree. "You think you've beaten me, don't you? But I've only used about 50% of my chakra, and the next time we meet, I won't underestimate you," said Itachi as he got back to his feet and looked Naruto in the eyes. "And what makes you think that there will be a next time?" "Simple. I'm not really here, Kisame, do it now," said Itachi as both he and Kisame made an unusual hand seal before both of them fell to the ground. "This is an odd jutsu," said Naruto as he waited a few moments before he causally knelt down and moved Itachi so that he was face up. "What the hell? This isn't Itachi," said Naruto as his eyes widen in shock when he sees a completely different person lying there. He then checks this person's vitals only to lower his head and say, "He's dead." Meanwhile Jiraiya was examining the person who used to be Kisame and after a couple of seconds he said, "This one is too. It looks like they used these people as sacrificial host bodies." Sacrificial host bodies? I've never heard of that jutsu, said Kushina as she moved closer to take a look. Jiraiya closed the dead person's eyes as he said, "These two were sacrificed in order to become Itachi and Kisame in appearance, while those two controlled them from afar." "So you're telling me that they're not even in the village?" said Naruto as he picked up his kodachi and put it away. Before Jiraiya could even respond, several squads of Anbu completely surrounded them. As a couple of the Anbu advanced on Naruto, who took a couple of steps back while he looked from left to right and brought his hand up to the handle of his kodachi. When the Anbu got within 10 feet of Naruto, Tsunade and Kushina appeared to block their path, while Haku and Zabuza appeared behind Naruto to make sure no one tried to sneak up on them. After a few tense moments of silence, the captain of the Anbu raised his hand and pointed at Naruto before he said, "Cease using its chakra, and stand down now." "What's the meaning of this?" shouted Tsunade as she glared at the Anbu captain. Instead of answering Tsunade, the Anbu captain decided to repeat himself. "I said, cease using its chakra, and stand down now, or we'll be forced to take more drastic action." After a few more moments of contemplation, Naruto was still uncertain on what he should do, so he looked at Tsunade and simply said, "Kasen." Tsunade continued to glare at the Anbu as she said, "We don't have much of a choice, Naru-chan, so do it, and don't worry, I promise, they won't lay a finger on you." Naruto just nodded his head as he started to channel Kyuubi's chakra back into the seal, which also caused the necklace's glow to fade. Once all of the chakra was back in the seal, Naruto started to feel the effects caused by breaking out of the Tsukuyomi, so he grabbed his head and went down on one knee. When Naruto went down, Tsunade wanted to go and check on him but was afraid that if she did that then the Anbu might try something, so she said, "Shizune, I'm on it. Just hold on Naruto-kun, I'll have you back to normal in no time," said Shizune as she started to examine Naruto. Once she finished the exam she turned to Tsunade and said, "Tsunade-sama, he's suffered some major mental trauma, I'm going to need some help here." Just then Jiraiya put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder and said, "Tsunade, go and look after your son, I deal with the Anbu." "Thanks Jiraiya," said Tsunade as a small smile appeared on her face as she went to go and help Naruto. While this was going on, one of the Anbu members checked the two people lying on the ground, and when he saw their faces he said, "Sir, these are the civilians that disappeared several days ago." The Anbu captain walked over and checked them before he said, "They're dead. Take that child into custody now." As some of the Anbu moved in on Naruto, Jiraiya just looked the captain in the eyes before he said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "And why is that, Jiraiya-sama?" "Because if you lay one finger on him, you won't live to see tomorrow," said Kushina as she flared her chakra and got into her fighting stance. Like she said, not only would you have to face Kushina here, but you'd also have to deal with two of the legendary Sannin, and I don't think you want that. "Do you?" said Jiraiya as he narrowed his eyes and got a serious look on his face. Just then the Hokage arrives on the scene, and after he surveys the area he said, "What's going on here?" "Well Hokage-sama, we found that kid over there using its chakra, and then we found the two missing civilians, they were both dead, apparently killed by the it," said the Anbu captain as we walked over to Sarutobi. "That's a lie. Naruto was just defending himself from Itachi," shouted Tsunade as she continued to heal the trauma. "Don't waste your breath Tsunade-sama, I don't think these idiots would believe us, even if we had Itachi in our custody. Even I can see that most of them are blinded by their hate. Let's just get out of here," said Zabuza as he looked from left to right and tightened his grip on his sword while Haku remained in a defensive stance right beside him. "Watch what you say Zabuza. These Anbu are trained to ascertain the situation with but a quick glance," said Sarutobi as he gave Zabuza a harsh glare before he looked over at Naruto and Tsunade. He then turned back to the Anbu captain and said, "But in this case, I'd have to agree Tsunade here. I highly doubt that those two civilians could have caused enough injuries to Naruto to get him to look that bad. Hey old man, I'd like to see how you'd look after breaking out of that damn Tsukuyomi of Itachi's," said Naruto as he lifted his head and tried to get up. Tsunade immediately put her hand on his shoulder to stop this attempt before she said, "Easy now Naru-chan, let me finish healing you before you try to move." As Tsunade finished healing Naruto, Sarutobi walked up to them and said, "Naruto, did you just say you broke out of Itachi's Tsukuyomi?" "Yes I did, and let me tell you, that was the strongest genjutsu I've ever faced, but now that I've experienced it, I'm going to have to create a counter. Because I do not want to go through that again," said Naruto as he shook his head a couple of times before he got to his feet and continued with, "I feel a lot better now. Thanks Kasen. Thanks Shizune Nichan. Hey, yeah right kid, the Tsukuyomi is the strongest genjutsu ever known, there's no way you broke out of it," said one of the Anbu members. "I really don't care if you believe me or not, but it did happen," said Naruto as he started to get a little irritated. This is when Kushina decided that enough was enough and said, "Look Sarutobi, we told you what happened, Itachi attacked Naruto-kun and he defended himself. So why don't we just leave it at that, and call it a day? If what you say is true then where is he? None of my men saw anyone leave the area, so that leads me to conclude that Itachi wasn't even here," said the Anbu captain. "Are you calling my son a liar?" said an angry Kushina as she narrowed her eyes and got in the captain's face. Sarutobi pulled the two apart and said, Now, no one is calling anyone a liar here, but the captain does raise a good point. If Itachi was here, then where did he go? I can answer that one, Sarutobi-sensei. It appears that Itachi used these two people as sacrificial host bodies, so he could get into the village and go after Naruto, and when he cancelled the jutsu, their bodies returned to normal, killing them in the process. So, Itachi could be miles away by now, said Jiraiya as he walked up to Sarutobi. I see. To think that Itachi would use that jutsu just to get at Naruto, but what really concerns me is that Itachi was able to get through our security so easily. I want a complete investigation into this matter. Is that clear? Said Sarutobi as he looked at the Anbu captain. But Hokage-sama, you can't be serious. Are you telling us to just let the boy go? Shouted the captain. That's exactly what I'm saying. You have no evidence that contradicts their statements, so they aren't going to be held, is that clear? And if you question my orders again, I'll reduce your rank to that of a genin, and make sure you're only assigned the lowliest of D-ranked mission, until I say otherwise. Got it, said Sarutobi as he glared at the Anbu captain. Hi Hokage-sama. Alright men, you heard Hokage-sama, spread out and search the area for anything out of the ordinary, then question all the gate guards. Try and find out how Itachi got into the village, said the Anbu captain as he and his men headed off to perform their duties. After all of the Anbu left, Sarutobi turned to Tsunade and said, I'm sorry for all the trouble, Tsunade, and don't worry, I'll have them increase security around the village. I won't let this happen again. Tsunade just nodded her head before she said, Thanks Sarutobi-sensei, but I'd look a little closer to home. They had to have help from the inside, how else could they have found out that Naru-chan was still alive? Now if you'll excuse us, we have to be on our way. Tsunade then had the others head back to her compound, and as they walked away, Sarutobi couldn't help but ponder Tsunade's words. Could Tsunade be right? Naruto has only been back for a couple of days, and the Akatsuki are already after him. So this begs the question, who informed them of Naruto's survival? Who betrayed the village? I've got a bad feeling about this. Later that evening at Tsunade's compound. After Tsunade and the others returned to the compound, Naruto went to his room saying that he wanted to be alone for a little while so he could think. Many hours later, Naruto had yet to come out and Shizune decided to go and check on him. When she reached his door, she knocked a couple of times before she opened it. When she looked inside, she was shocked to discover that the room was empty, with the only sign on how he left was an open window by his bed. As she was about to run out and inform Tsunade, she noticed a small note left on the dresser. Shizune picked up the note and began to read it. Sorry everyone, but I just couldn't think clearly in my room, so I decided to get some fresh air and stretch my legs, so to speak. I'll be back in a little while, so don't worry about me, okay? Naruto. After Shizune read the letter again, she ran out of the room to go and tell Tsunade. In the main living room of the compound, Anko rested her back against the wall as she looked at Tsunade and said, So, when are you guys going to tell me what happened earlier today? I know I felt Kyuubi's chakra, and when I went to investigate, Anbu had already secured the area and wouldn't let me in. They're just lucky that Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma showed up when they did, otherwise they would have gotten a lot worse than just a couple of scraps and cuts. A couple of scraps and cuts. From what I heard, 2 of them had to be sent to the hospital, and one of them is probably just thankful that he can still see out of his left eye. I just wish I could have seen their faces when you started to kick the crap out of them, said Kushina as she got a smile on her face and shook her head. Tsunade started to chuckle before she said, Yes, that would have been a sight to see, but to answer your question, we really don't know. All we do know is that Itachi tried to capture Naru-chan, and during the confrontation Itachi was able to get Naruto with a very powerful genjutsu. Naru-chan was somehow able to break out of it, and then let's just say that Itachi got away. So, what did the Gaki see in the genjutsu? Asked a concerned Anko. We don't know, he refuses to talk about it, and it's got me a little worried. Whatever happened there, combined with his breakout caused a lot of trauma. I helped where I could, but I don't know how it affected him mentally, said a very worried Tsunade. Just then Shizune burst into the room and shouted, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade-sama. Naruto-kun left a note that said, he went out to get some fresh air and to sort things out. We have to go and find him. With everything that's happened, I don't think he should be out there alone. Tsunade just leaned back in her chair and brought her left hand up to her chin before she said, I see coming back here, has brought out some of Naru-chan's old habits. Kushina got a curious look on her face before she said, what do you mean, Tsunade? When we first took Naru-chan in, he had a habit of going off, and finding a quiet place to think whenever was troubled. It took me a couple of years, but I finally was able to get Naru-chan to talk to me about what was troubling him, said Tsunade as she let out a sigh and then continued, but as I said, it looks like this habit has resurfaced. So, we better go and look for him. We still don't know if Itachi has left the village or not, and I don't want to run the risk of losing him, so let's go. After everyone in the room nodded their heads, they all split up to go and look for Naruto. As Tsunade left the compound, she tried to figure out where Naruto could have gone to. That's when she suddenly remembers something Naruto had told her once, and she then turned her gaze toward the Hokage monument. Meanwhile, at the Hokage monument, Naruto was currently on top of the Yondaime's head, lying on his back as he stared at the necklace that Tsunade had given him as he thought, this little thing saved my life today. But, how did it help me control so much of Ba-chan's chakra? I thought that only the Shandai Hokage could use this necklace to control the powers of a Biju. What do you think, Ba-chan? I'm not too sure what to think right now, Kit, but there is one thing I do know. This necklace definitely responded to your chakra, and not only that, but it helped you control your five-tailed form. I know that, but the question still remains, why did it respond to my chakra in the first place? And more importantly, will I be able to learn how to use it anytime I want? I don't know, Kit. I guess only time will tell. Just as Kyuubi finished saying that, a noise could be heard from behind Naruto, and as he got to his feet he saw Tsunade come out from behind the tree line. When Tsunade saw that Naruto was definitely here, her lips curved into a small smile as she said, I thought I'd find you here. I remember you telling me that this used to be your favorite place to come and get away from all the hatred of the village. Yeah, at first I just went out for a walk, but after several choice words from some of the villagers, I decided to come here and get some peace and quiet. But enough about that, I just can't believe you remembered that. I mean, I only told you once, and that was a long time ago, said Naruto as he sat back down. As Naruto stared out over the village, Tsunade sat down right next to him, and as she put her arm around him she said, Hey Naru-chan, is everything okay? You've been really quiet since your encounter with Itachi. If there's anything you want to talk about, I'm always ready to lend an ear. Thanks, Kasen. Maybe it would help if I told someone about this, said Naruto as he closed his eyes and took a deep breath before he opened his eyes and continued, well, when Itachi had me in his Tsukuyomi, he showed me my worst nightmare. Your worst nightmare? You don't mean? Said Tsunade as his eyes widened in realization. Yeah, Kasen, he forced me to watch, as the ones I care about were slaughtered, and he even had the guts to have Kushina, the old man, Jiraiya, and a couple of Konoha shinobi personally kill you all. When I get my hands on him, said Naruto in a low voice as he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Without a moment's hesitation, Tsunade enveloped Naruto in a hug, and as she rocked him back and forth she said, Don't worry, it's okay Naru-chan, we won't let him get away with this. The next time he shows up we'll beat him down together, okay? Naruto couldn't help but chuckle when he pictured Itachi beaten to a pulp and begging for his life after he and Tsunade had gotten through with him, Sure, it might not happen that way, but it did wonders for Naruto's mood. After Naruto settled down, he looked over at Tsunade and said, "Thanks, Kasen, I needed that." Meanwhile, in the woods behind them, Kushina had hidden herself behind one of the trees. She had come up here to look for Naruto when she overheard Naruto and Tsunade talking. But before she made her presence known, Naruto told Tsunade about what he was forced to watch, and when she heard that Itachi had used her image to help slaughter Naruto's loved ones, she just leaned against one of the trees and slid down until she was in sitting position. She then brought her hand up to her chest and thought, "Itachi used my image to slaughter Naruto-kun's loved ones. How am I ever going to prove myself to him now?" After Kushina came out of her shock about this, she then clenched her fist as she narrowed her eyes and thought, "That bastard. I'm going to make him suffer for what he did to my son." As Tsunade released Naruto from the hug, she asked him, "Naru-chan, you said that Itachi used Kushina's image in the genjutsu, right? So, does this change your opinion of her?" Naruto thought about for a moment before he said, "Actually yes, but not in the way you might think. With what Itachi did, and then Kushina's actions after the ambush showed up, it made me realize something, and that is, I don't really hate her." "You don't really hate her?" "Yeah, I can't really explain it, but every time I saw her kill you, I knew deep down that she would never do that, and then when she stood up to the Anbu in my defense, I may not have shown it, but it made me realize that she really does care about me and is willing to stand up to Konoha, just like my Kasen. And besides, if I hadn't been left in this village to rot, I never would have met you or the rest of my family," said Naruto as he got a smile on his face and looked over at Tsunade, who returned the smile. After Kushina heard Naruto's comments, tears started to well up in her eyes, and as a smile appeared on her face, she thought, "He doesn't hate me. Naruto-kun doesn't hate me. Now I just hope he can find it in his heart to see me as another member of his family." Naruto and Tsunade sat there for a little while before Naruto looked down at the Shodai's necklace in his hand and said, "Well, Kasen, it looks like the curse on this necklace has been lifted, doesn't it?" Tsunade got a curious look on her face as she said, "The curse has been lifted. What do you mean, Naru-chan?" "Well, this necklace is responsible for saving my life today. I don't think I would have been able to break out of Itachi's Tsukuyomi without its help. I just wish I knew how I was able to use it the way I did," said Naruto as he rotated the necklace in his hands and watched the light reflect off of it. "I don't know either, Naru-chan. My Ojiazan is the only one I know about that can use the necklace like that, but I promise you, we are going to find out," said Tsunade as she looked at the glimmering necklace. "And I'll help you figure it out too," said Kushina as she made her presence known and walked out from behind the tree line. Naruto and Tsunade quickly turned around and looked at Kushina before Naruto said, "How long have you been there?" Kushina just lowered her head slightly and in a soft voice said, "Since you said Itachi showed you your worst nightmare." "I see," said Naruto as he let out a deep sigh before he continued with, "Then I guess you know that I don't hate you, but I know, Naruto-kun, you might not hate me, but you don't feel any kind of connection with me either, right?" Interrupted Kushina, and when she saw Naruto nod his head she added, "That's what I thought, but all I'm asking is that you let me become a part of your life. I want to be there for you, like Tsunade-sama has been, and believe me when I tell you this, I have no intentions of trying to replace Tsunade-sama, but I hope that in time, you might come to see me as a second mother. So please, just let me be a part of your life, and then we'll see where we go from there, okay?" As Naruto thought about this, Kushina crossed her fingers and hoped for the best, and when Naruto finally came to a decision, he looked directly at Kushina and said, "Alright, I won't stop you from being a part of my life, and as for the rest, we'll just wait and see what happens." Kushina got a big smile on her face, and as she wiped away her tears of happiness she said, "Thank you, Naruto-kun, thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." This happiness was short-lived, however, as just a few moments after Kushina was able to compose herself, a Chunin messenger appeared and looked at Naruto before he said, "Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto looked at this shinobi suspiciously before he said, "And if I am?" The Chunin messenger simply said, "I've been instructed to inform you that you have been summoned to appear before the council." "On what grounds?" said Tsunade as she walked up to the messenger. "It regards the incident earlier today, Tsunade-sama," said the intimidated Chunin. "You've got to be kidding me. Are they trying to pin that on me now?" said an aggravated Naruto. The Chunin turns to face Naruto once again and said, "I wouldn't know, I was just instructed to find you and bring you to the council chambers." Kushina looked at the Chunin with a questioning gaze as she said, "And if he refuses to go? Then a contingent of Anbu will be sent to place him under arrest for obstructing an ongoing investigation." Naruto just looked at the Chunin with a very serious look on his face as he said, "So, what you're telling me is that I really have no say in the matter?" "That's correct. Now if you'll follow me, I'll take you to the council chambers," said the Chunin as he waited for a response. Tsunade just looked at Naruto and said, "Well, Naru-chan, what do you want to do?" Naruto pondered this for a couple of seconds before he said, "Well, I don't really feel like having an entire village trying to hunt me down once I leave here, so we'll go and see what they want. If things go bad, we can always make a break for it, right, Kasen?" "Right. No matter what happens, Naru-chan, I won't let them lay one finger on you," said Tsunade as she put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Kushina then put her hand on his other shoulder, and when he turned to look at her, she got a smile on her face and said, "That goes double for me." Naruto couldn't help but get a smile on his face as he nodded his head in appreciation. He then looked over at the Chunin and said, "Lead the way, I want to get this over with as soon as possible." The Chunin just nodded his head and led them toward the council chambers.